Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and that FPL treated you well. Today, I will have for you a thorough overview of everything that happened, including match analysis and specific player insights. I will, of course, have my transfer plans and discuss my team in general, amongst a huge variety of other things. We will, of course, as well, touch on the captaincy, which I imagine there'll be some discourse in the comment section about. Overall, it's a pretty decent game week, I would say. We're up about 100k places. We've got Isaac and Hall to come tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe we could do another 100k. And chopping the ranking half in 1 week when it was already decent to begin with isn't too shabby at all. So we will see how things unfold. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Now, so many of you who watch regularly, about 40 to 50% of you, it fluctuates, who watch regularly, have not subscribed. So if you could just check if you click the button and do so if you have not, I would be very appreciative. Hopefully, by the end of this game week, we'll be at 5,000 subscribers, which would be a magnificent achievement to hit. And as always, I am very, very grateful for your support. But without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. 4 or 5 points were so unnecessarily lost here. Not only did he pick up a yellow card, which he really didn't need to pick up, especially considering Chelsea were 2-0 up and cruising, but he then concedes in the last minute from a penalty, which we really didn't need to concede, and he probably should have saved. If you were watching the game live, you would have heard the millisecond before you saw it hit the net that he got a hand to it, and it was quite a loud noise when you were watching it live, and you assumed that he kind of just saved it, considering it was in close proximity to him as well. But it wasn't to be, and he finished on a 1-pointer when really that should have been a 5, 6, or who knows, plus the penalty save, plus some bonus, like an 8, 9-pointer easily. But it wasn't to be. Still relatively happy keeping him. Obviously, Leicester showed no threat, and we'll talk about that in the match analysis section. So there was pretty much no opportunity for him to accumulate any saves apart from a 5-minute period towards the end of the first half. But with the fixtures he has coming up as a long-term hold, I'm very happy to have him. One thing I did like personally for my team is the fact that Verbruggen didn't haul. I think going Sanchez and Dunk over Verbruggen and Colwell would have hurt a little bit if Verbruggen got that 10-pointer, 9-pointer, which he was very close to getting at the end. But I'm very happy with Sanchez. I'd say he has a higher ceiling next week than Verbruggen, albeit when we come on to Southampton, they've definitely got enough to cause Brighton some problems. And yeah, like pretty simple section, easy hold, and hopefully next week can be the start of Sanchez supremacy. Gabriel has finally returned for the first time since game week 5, I believe, which is absolutely ridiculous when you consider the run of fixtures. But it was a fairly simple 6-pointer, apart from the disallowed goal at the end and one Callum Hudson-Odoi chance, which he swiped out but missed. It was a fairly routine victory for Arsenal from a defensive standpoint. And like I mentioned, easy hold going forward with the quality of fixtures that he has and the fact that Arsenal are getting their injured players back. Another thing, however, something I spoke about, that Marino is not good for his box threat. Well, we saw that again. There was a set piece in the first half before Bukayo Saka scored his brilliant goal where Timber scored, but it came from a Marino header initially. And I've just found Marino to be the main magnet now within that box. So if you are thinking about going without him, I do not think this is the same Gabriel that we had in game week 1. I think his box threat is reduced. And if you really did want to make a play and go against, I think you have that now on your side to certainly help you out. Ryan Aït-Nouri, I mean, they deservedly concede Wolves in that game. They certainly should have. Raul Jimenez could have easily had at least one, but potentially a brace. But he was getting in such good positions consistently. And what I realized is I'm actually really happy, even if I have to play him every week, because, yeah, sure, he might not keep a clean sheet, but most teams aren't. And on top of that, the positions he's taking up are so attacking. He's got the technical quality to deliver in the final third that I'm always this close to an attacking return. So very happy to hold him. And I'm very much looking forward to Lewis Hall tomorrow and hopefully helping me propel the rank so that it starts with a 1. And now we come to the captaincy, which I imagine, like I said earlier, there will certainly be some discourse about in the comment section. Now, look, you may see this completely differently as to how I do in the current moment, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. For me, personally, I think what I did is absolutely fine. We'll talk about the outcome in a second. But from a decision-making standpoint, and in terms of how the game actually played out, I don't think you can say personally that I made a mistake. I thought Cole Palmer had a better performance than Mohamed Salah. I think aside from the 2 goals and the chance he hit at the end when Southampton were really going for it when he hit the post, Salah really didn't have too much in the game. And even the goals he did score, a brilliant pass from Gravenberch and a brilliant finish, but keeper's got to do so much better. And then a penalty from a good cross, but they really shouldn't be conceding a handball and a penalty from there. So from a decision-making standpoint, I think it was fine. Obviously, Palmer had that shot block from Madueke. He scores that. It's minimum, like, let's say a 9-pointer, right? Then the swing's only 5, and then who knows what unravels from there. Palmer was popping up in some good positions, not as many as I would like, and we'll speak about that. Chelsea completely dominated Leicester, whereas Liverpool certainly had some struggles. So from a decision-making standpoint, I personally think it's fine. I think the flip side and the counter argument would be that Salah is so inevitable, so inevitable at the moment. I think it's a fair argument because when someone's in such good form, things just tend to happen for them. And he seems to have the Midas touch, and he's also the best right winger and arguably the best player in the Premier League, not just at the moment, just full stop for the last X amount of years when you take everything into account. So I understand the counter argument. I think it's fair, but from my standpoint, I think the swing is unjustified in terms of performance. But these things happen, and that's okay. We'll take it on the chin. I think I'm down 21 points on going against Salah as captain in the last 2 weeks, which is a lot when you think about it. But you know what? I think in both cases, my decisions were fine. I'd argue both Haaland and Palmer had better performances or conditions to at least perform better. But, it is what it is. And if you went there, congratulations. You deserve the points. Absolutely. Right? Was Southampton away, after all, for the best player in the Premier League, arguably. Bryan Mbeumo, I kind of always knew what I was getting here with him, right? I knew that Everton away would be tough. I knew he'd been playing wider. For me, the reason I had him was not only did he provide a great route into Bowen, but primarily Leicester at home in 13. Now, Steve Cooper's been sacked, and I imagine they just get a bit better, right? Not only will they play a bit more attacking football, but you can just imagine the general level of quality raises in terms of their football. So it's probably not the best thing for him, but at least if they're a bit more open, he can catch them. And Brentford at home always engage in a very aggressive and attacking tempered game. So that's that. Saka we'll talk about in the match analysis section. I really think you need to devise a plan to get him. What I saw, well, I was very impressed from what I saw. And with the fixtures he has, I think they're quite suited to him. And I think he could just really, really hurt you quite consistently if you don't have him, especially with Arsenal getting their injured players back. You've got to remember there was no Rice either on Saturday, and they still look very, very competent. So for me, especially when there's no Haaland, you can easily allocate the funds. A lot of you would have Cunha in your front line anyway, as opposed to me having more expensive options, Isak and Jackson. Saka for me is becoming a bit of a no-brainer. Rodgers obviously is on the bench, and that was a last-minute move. Not last minute, maybe I think I did about 4 o'clock in the morning. Before I went to sleep, I decided, okay, I'm going to play João Pedro ahead of him. It is something I spoke about in the Solving Your Problems video. I was talking about how I was getting cold feet, and then I did update it just in case some of you guys miss it. I do update my team if I'm going to change it. So yeah, he had a few opportunities to return, half opportunities, but there wasn't too much, and Villa certainly were a little bit worse without the eights performing particularly well, which we'll talk about, and then no Onana or Kamara in the middle to help. This bit went really, really, really well. When I checked the scores, I think it was 3:19. I went onto the Premier League app and I saw it was 1-0 Brighton. I was just like, please, João Pedro. When he scored, I was like, this is what value for money is. I mean, for him to rock up with a 12-pointer from 63 minutes, I imagine he would have played a bit more if Baliba hadn't got sent off. But it was also good because he's just reintegrating himself after an injury. So I think it was a nice way for him to settle in. He's so good, and we're going to talk about this in the match analysis section. But at his price, which I believe now is 5.6, I think you just pretty much have to buy him as a excellent enabler, and the fixtures are certainly there without a doubt. Jackson, we spoke about him so much in the wildcard video, so much, even the everything you need to know video about how he established that. For me, at least, he was a tier 1 striker. Obviously, Cunha's put up a 16-pointer, and good on him. We're going to touch on him later, but again, he comes up with the goods with a 12-pointer, and again, we'll speak about it later, but the zones he's occupying and what he's doing on the pitch, I really, really like. And I don't expect him to slow down. And from a stylistic perspective, pretty much all of the fixtures coming up suit him to a T. Isak and Hall tomorrow. So now we can talk about the performance of a team as a whole. 290k at this stage of the season, considering I've used a wild card this week, considering some of my players are definitely going to catch price rises. João Pedro already has. You wouldn't be surprised if Nori, Hall, Isak if he does well, Jackson, Saka, if they all start to catch some price rises. So that could be very, very helpful, and certainly looking to finish the Christmas period in a very, very strong way, considering the depth the squad's got, the transfer plans, and just the general quality of the team. So whilst I'm not delighted with the week, I would have been if I captained Salah and I had an additional 12 points and I'd been 100 whatever with Isak to play. It's still quite a solid week to start from, and I think my team always looked better in 13. So I'm quite happy with it. And then in 14, I can be a little bit aggressive. 2 former managers of Leicester City took charge yesterday, and it was Enzo Maresca who came up trumps. For me personally, whilst it's not as bad as it was when he was playing a sole left 8 role, I don't love this Palmer role. What we saw a lot yesterday was Madueke providing the width, being really wide. Jackson staying in those central areas, which we'll speak about. Enzo playing more on that, in that right side pocket, even though he was dropping deep at times, a lot in that right half space. Palmer's like a 10, and then João Felix almost like a left 8 at times. But what I found was, given Palmer's left-footed, his natural tendencies is always to pull into that side. Because just imagine the angle in your head. It's just a pull to that left-hand side, and therefore he's operating a little bit more from there. Plus, with the congestion on that right side of Enzo there, and the fact that I already mentioned the angle in which he receives that makes him tend towards the left side, he doesn't really find himself in that right half space too much. And we've kind of established that's his best zone. For me, that's not a great thing because I don't think I'm going to get as many goals from him as I will from the left-hand side. I know you would say it's got nothing to do with angles, but even the goal that he should have scored where Madueke blocked it was him popping up from that right side. I think he's just much more in tune with, I think for a variety of reasons, predominantly angles, he's just much more suited to getting goals from that right side. But if that's not to be the case, if he's to play more at the top as a half left-sided 10 in terms of the top of a diamond, then I don't think it's going to be as good. But there was enough there whereby you still think he could return points. I just don't think the big hauls, are going to be as easy to attain. Jackson, I spoke about it earlier. I spoke about it previously. The zones he's occupying are brilliant. Even if he has to do some form of channel running, it's fine because it's never too wide. And he's still got wingers to provide the width anyway who can support him. When he drops deep, it's fine because it's only Palmer really running off him, or at least it was. So he's going to generate assists in that fashion. He also looks really sharp. He's got the physical makeup to, when he's deep anyway, to carry particularly well and not get shrugged off the ball and be able to get in and around defenders very well. He can attack space and behind and penetrate it when it's there. So he can do a lot of things. And the function within this team, with the zones he's operating, I think allow him to have quite a high ceiling, quite a high floor as well. You saw the finish yesterday, and it was a very, very impressive finish. And if you can keep that type of level up with what he's being provided with the conditions, especially having a creative like Palmer behind him, I like it. The other thing I like is I think by a mile he has the best understanding with Cole Palmer. I tweeted it yesterday. He just simply looks to pass the ball to his best player. And I'm going to come on to Enzo and Madueke and what I didn't like from yesterday. But he genuinely just passes the ball to Palmer, and he gets his almost good karma back because Palmer's always looking to find him. And it's very helpful when you've got a runner like Jackson, you've got a creative like Palmer, and they're in sync. So I think if the Chelsea team in general just gave Palmer the ball a little bit more, it would be a lot better. But yeah, very, very bullish on Jackson. And I think we'll talk about Villa, but he can really exploit them. I didn't like the right-hand side dynamics. Now, people will say Enzo had a good game, and okay, that's fine. And people won't be too happy with Madueke, but we'll come on to him. I think Enzo indirectly is really hurting the team. So Maresca spoke about it earlier in the season, whereby in certain games you want a base of Lavia Caicedo because it's better from a defensive standpoint. This game we really didn't need that, right? Obviously, we weren't getting hurt in transition. Leicester really weren't dominating the ball. We were deep. You needed more of an attacking orientated player. But I think the fact that Enzo is occupying these right half spaces in these advanced zones takes away from Palmer. And we really don't need to do that. Like, if we can just let Palmer play that, I wouldn't even mind playing another attacking player or a completely different profile at all, or even having Lavia at the base to play alongside Caicedo and then just letting Palmer have a bit more dominion over the attacking patterns, even if we are to have one less man. Now, against a low block like Leicester, yeah, you want numerical superiority in the middle because otherwise it's harder to get them to shift. I get that, right? But we could do it in a slightly different way. So if this is going to persist, I don't particularly like it. I didn't like how selfish Madueke was. And I've been quite a big supporter of him. Even like last season, I was like, oh, it's a good player. I think he's going to do quite well. And there are things I like about him. I'm sure Maresca likes a lot about him, especially from the comments I've read. But I do genuinely think, like yesterday as well, he was just a little bit too selfish. And I just want Palmer found a little bit more. The goal, well, the no goal that Palmer got blocked, that happens, right? So it is what it is, and it would have been a completely different story for the captaincy. That I don't mind too much, but it's more so just the general dynamics. Now, Villa and Palace are both on rough runs, and look at the goals Sarr scored. They're so high at the Villa line anyway, and then because they don't have the recovery place or the athleticism to deal with a huge, powerful runner like Sarr, they get exploited, and it's happened time and time again. And that's why I say, from a stylistic perspective, I really can see Jackson hurting them there. It's going to be difficult for them to offset that. It's not like they're getting any new personnel in. I don't think Conte is going to play at right centre back, even if he is back. There's no Onana or Kamara. Well, there was no Onana or Kamara for the weekend. Who knows what happens against Chelsea? So from that perspective, I still think they're very susceptible there. Another thing that I've spoken about, the two things that I don't like in this side: one, the right back two, and then three, the eights or the wider players. I don't think they're supporting Rodgers and Watkins enough. I don't think that they're just doing enough. And what I find is these two are getting a little bit isolated, so it's harder for them to generate returns as a whole, but also accessing the ceiling is becoming increasingly more difficult. Palace were better. Palace were certainly better. I don't think their pivot was anywhere near as bad as it has been in previous weeks. One thing I was surprised at is there was a lot of space sometimes when they advanced. I don't think they were managing that too well. They were caught on transition a little bit, and that's definitely something to watch out for. Is if Isak could hurt them in that way. I can't remember which game it was, but I was surprised as to how much the striker hurt them. It was at Selhurst, but I can't remember which game it was. So that's something to watch out for, and it's certainly a matchup that could be good for Isak down the line, and probably something they'll involve. When will the bleeding stop? It was the most Spurs game you've ever seen. They lose to Ipswich at home after a good win prior, and then they go to the Etihad and put on an unbelievable show to finish up 4-0 ahead against the champions, and no one does that to Manchester City. So, yeah, the most Spurs-like performance you've probably ever seen. For City, I think it's bad at the moment. It certainly is. I wouldn't say it's maybe as bad as people think, because imagine, right, just the finishing and nothing else had not been as bad as it's been for the last 3-4 games. It wasn't great against, or the final pass. It really wasn't great against Brighton, and it was awful against Spurs. Haaland could have genuinely have had a hat-trick on another day, but instead he doesn't, and they lose 4-0. The main issue for me is off the ball and what they've got going on in the middle of the park, because I think it creates so many problems, and so many of their problems sprout from there. They had a midfield of primarily like Gundo Rico, right? And it just got ran over. Like, I missed the first 20 minutes in the game, so I had to catch up with it last night. But the second I turned it on, they went for a ball-side high press. Now, when I say ball-side high press, there's different types of like high presses, right? For example, when a team's building up and they're deep, you could always go man-to-man and still cover like the opposition fullback who's really wide on the other side. But in general, they look to close the space and almost create a little bit of like a U umbrella type of shape and really box Spurs in. And Spurs play through that. And the second they play through that, City are dead, because they don't have the athletes in the middle to recover in any sense. And Spurs were pretty much, I think, like 3-3 or 4-4 with their last line very quickly. So that is what I think is a huge issue, right? Because it makes it very difficult for them to sustain pressure within a game, and the opposition will get more confident, and they'll just be conceding goals as a result. Now, what's the solution for that? Well, it's not easy, because you don't have Rodri, you don't have Kovacic, and even when you did, he's not like the best jeweler in the world. He's good, but he's not the best jeweler in the world, and he's definitely not space eater given his physical profile. Matthias Nunez can play there, but Pep doesn't really like him playing him there. He's also got a different skill set, even though he is far more robust physically and will cover a lot more space. So they don't really have anyone, even in their backline. Like, okay, Stones used to play as part of like a double pivot when he used to invert, but like, I don't really think he's got the physical makeup to do that at the moment. So what they do I'm not quite sure, but it's not looking great for them. Then going forward, like, it's not too bad. Going forward, it's really not. They're just not really on song. And when you're not finishing, right, everything looks a little bit worse. So Liverpool, they could hurt them. Like, if City put on the same type of a performance, they could hurt them. Pep Guardiola is undoubtedly the best manager. Well, not undoubtedly, but arguably one of the best managers. No, the best manager of all time. But one thing we've seen is his persistence in his philosophy, right? He's definitely iterated consistently. There is an underlying philosophy that never really goes away. And one thing he probably hasn't been super keen on is changing the way in which he plays. I wonder if he almost has to go into Anfield with the physical makeup and the physical profiles he has within his midfield. Because I think if they field a similar type of side in a similar type of system, playing a similar type of way, they could get really hurt. So that's something to note with your Liverpool and City assets next week. Spurs were good. They obviously had their moments, which they're always going to have against a side like Manchester City, where they can see the chances. But going forward, they were ruthless. They were efficient. Again, Kulusevski, really good. And yeah, it was just a bit of a freak game as well. So I'm not going to read into it too much, but you kind of expect Spurs to always put a performance in when they go there. João Pedro is just a very, very, very good footballer. Some of the things yesterday were just brilliant. I loved his goal, right? Because you'll see a lot of other goals scored, and people will be like, oh, is it happened? But it was the instinct to be there, the way he continued his run. And the fact that he's doing that pretty much straight back after injury, 4 minutes into the game, just shows me that we're going to get goals and returns from things like that, where other players maybe wouldn't have made that type of run. Then you look at the assist. It's just sheer quality. And he demonstrated that quality throughout the game. Somewhat similar to Cunha. Even if things aren't going so well, he will just pop up with something through his own quality to get us returns. But we don't need to worry about the external circumstances, really, because Brighton are playing magnificently well, and they're functioning fantastically with him, and the way everything's interacting with him from an FPL standpoint is absolutely brilliant. Bournemouth, I thought it was a similar story. Again, a good performance at home, good-ish performance at home. their high press and general style of play and their intensity generated them chances. The finishing again let them down a little bit. They really, if they could just be a bit more ruthless and efficient in front of goal, and had they been this season, I think the assets, specifically Semenyo, would be sky high in terms of returns. One thing I've noticed with them though, no one hurts them in the wide areas. Like absolutely no one when you go away to Bournemouth hurts them in the wide areas. Like people be like, "Oh, Matoma scored," but look where the goal he scored was from. It's pretty much inside the box. He was pretty much in that left half space / central area, and that's where they popped up. But actually exploiting their fullbacks 1-on-1 and getting him behind and then crossing from there, it just doesn't really happen. I think that's one reason why Sancho had such a good game when we were at Bournemouth and we were so poor in the first half, is because a highly associative winger who doesn't necessarily look to stretch the back line, but is playing in front of it and playing in front of the fullback, poses a significantly different problem to Bournemouth, to what they usually have. And I think that's probably the way to go against Bournemouth. So sides who do that, that's something to know. So for me, when you're playing them, in terms of your assets, you want assets who are playing centrally. And Matheus Cunha obviously does that next week, which I'm slightly concerned about, but I'm hoping that the difference in quality between the sides is enough for me to see a Cunha blank and Bournemouth to get the job done for me. Really, really happy with João Pedro going forward. And I would strongly recommend that with the way Brighton are playing, to bring him in. The other thing is, I really like Hertzler. I think being so young and he's so mature, and he's clearly got his style of playing, but he has shown flexibility within it. I think it's a fantastic trait going forward. They obviously don't have too many commitments outside of the Prem, so I think it could be a really, really, really good transfer in for João Pedro, maybe even getting one of their defensive assets, assuming that you think it's good value for money. Bakaya's back, and I think you might need him sometime soon, so I would be looking to devise some plans to getting him in, specifically using João Pedro as a facilitator within that front line to get a very good asset there, and an even better one in midfield. He looked really, really sharp. The goal is a joke. Like, he takes a touch, which the ball is over his head. He takes a touch, brings it down. Odegaard plays a little pass to him, and the way he manufactures the angle, the level of ball striking from that angle, being off balance, the fact that he had to dribble and carry it into there, is just magnificent. It shows the quality. Similar to João Pedro, similar to Cunha. Conditions in that instance, maybe not there, but the quality always able to not always, but quality able to generate the return in that instance. And then just in general, there was a lot of threat he carried throughout the game. Forest, obviously one of the better sides off the ball in the league outside of the top six, and he could have generated at least one more return in the first half. Looked so dangerous. And you have to remember, there was no Rice, there was no Havertz, so Arsenal could have, and Martinelli was on the bench, so they could have been a lot better. In general, really, really, really happy with what I saw. There's no point me continually waxing lyrical. You can just go and watch the highlights for yourself, but I really would recommend to bringing him in sometime soon. What I would say as well is, right, with Odegaard back and being one of the better profiles to have against Overbox, especially when you combine the quality with the profile, they're probably going to play quite a few of those. They've got West Ham, who I imagine will sit pretty deep against them. They go high. I think Arsenal would destroy them with how weak they've been in the middle and the susceptibility to transition. They've got Fulham, who will definitely sit pretty deep against them. They've got Man United, who we'll talk about in the next slide, and they sat pretty deep, especially in the first half. But mainly in the first half, they were quite deep, and their press was quite lethargic and not super high. So maybe United set up pretty deep against them. So to have Odegaard back for all of this, just to improve Arsenal overall and allow Saka a little bit more freedom, because he won't be shackled by the responsibility of being a creator who has to do it all himself, I think will be really good for them. In general, their patterns of play seemed a lot better. They were a lot sharper. So from that standpoint, very good. I saw a lot of questions about Timber in the week prior, or the week that just followed, and I assumed Calafiori would be the one who's more advanced. I've seen him push into that left half space, those central areas a lot, and advanced zones, specifically against PSG. But it was Timber who was getting quite far forward. So if he's going to continue to pick up those positions, on the assumption he can stay fit, yeah, I don't mind it at all. But you have to understand the expected minutes risk you're taking. I'm not going to read too much into this Forest fixture. They've been so good this season, right? And then one bad performance when they don't have Elliot Anderson. They don't have Morgan Gibbs-White, which is a huge loss. Chris Wood didn't start. And he started both Elanga and Cho, whereby he started neither of them, I believe, at Anfield, because he was playing a different system, more like literally having 5 centre mids. So I'm not really going to read into this too much. Off day, players weren't there. Move on. Okay. Fulham, I expected them to win, and arguably they should have, considering the chances they had early on, and the fact that the Wolves, from a chance creation standpoint, didn't actually create too much outside of Matheus Cunha. This guy, similar to João Pedro, is just very, very, very good at football. The first goal, like Gary O'Neill says, straight off the training ground. It's a brilliant diagonal ball, but to take it down, the composure and the finish, top. The second goal he scores, top. The assist, the composure, the way to pass, the knowingness of what to do, top. And outside of that, they really didn't create much. Obviously, they scored that fourth goal, but like Fulham are just going for it and they just counter. But yeah, they didn't create too much. But again, it's his quality which he leverages to get the returns. Now, can this keep going? Yeah, it probably can. He's not going to put up 12 and 16 points every week if Wolves play like this, in my opinion. But given he's so good on the bonus system, I think you can definitely expect like in the 7, 8, 9 range. If he only gets an assist, or I could probably pick up 2 bonus points to get a 7-pointer. So from that standpoint, good. I'm still a bit concerned with the fact that from a chance creation standpoint, not great. And like how much can he keep doing this? Well, to this extent, I don't think so, but to a lesser extent, yeah, for sure. One of those games for Fulham, like Jimenez should score at least once, maybe twice, inches away from a goal when they flashed it across the box, etc., etc. I think they'll be fine. But Anderson was injured. I don't know the extent of that injury. If he's out, I think it's a big blow because I think he really helps to break down a certain structure as well with his diagonals. And he's just one of the better defenders in this side and certainly one of the top 2 centre-backs. So yeah, we didn't learn too much, I would say. And if you did have Cunha, though, congratulations on the points. I think it was a more than justified transfer in. As he always seems to do, he delivers a Christmas present early for some of you. Honestly, he might just be inevitable. I was talking to a friend during the game, and I was just saying to him, maybe the one thing that I could have probably taken into account more is that he just has the Midas touch at the moment. And I always say, it's not the best thing to bet against momentum. And this is probably more than that. This really does seem like a Midas touch, somewhat divine Midas touch. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'll continue to bet against him. We'll have to see in the near future, but he might just be inevitable. In terms of his performance, I mean, like, he really didn't have much, right? Like Southampton played pretty well, and we'll come on to that. It was a self-inflicted defeat, but they played pretty well. They limited him quite well with their 5-4-1, and yeah, like the goal is fantastically well taken, albeit very poor from the keeper. And then the penalty is a bit of a stupid penalty to give away, but slotted home very well. From Liverpool today, I didn't think they were great. One thing I've noticed under Slot is in certain games, particularly the quote-unquote easier ones, he'll build with a single pivot. However, I think today you didn't really want Szoboszlai and Jones receiving in the way they did. It was Jones who was a bit deep, and I actually thought if it was the other way around, it would have been a bit more helpful. I think having Szoboszlai's almost more carrying power. Jones is good, but I think Szoboszlai's probably got a little bit more. And having him a little bit deeper when Gravenberch is functioning as a single pivot, and having Jones for those acute little passes in that right half space, almost closer to Salah, I think would have been better. But like niche point, and they got the job done anyway. Southampton were good. I mean, like they've shown that they can play some football, but again, self-inflicted defeat. Didn't need to make the mistakes that they made, specifically the first goal, right, and the third one, and the second one. They were all just really poor mistakes. The one thing I would say is now that you're playing against them, you know what you're going to get. You know that you can concede, and your likelihood of a clean sheet isn't probably as high as it was against like a Leicester type of side yesterday, but you also know that on transition you can really hurt them, and on high turnovers there's always points on offer for you there. So even if you're not having the best game, they can certainly offer something to you. So I would say defensive floor is certainly down, but attacking floor is certainly up. And yeah, we could analyze the Liverpool performance a bit more, but realistically, are they probably going to play like that again? Probably not, right? But Nunes was super ineffective today. Again, playing against back 5, not too much space, can't really utilize his movement because they were deeper, and like kind of running is less of an option when they're that deep. And there's more personnel because you're always marked and you can't drag. But they're not playing against that structure too much. They weren't great. It was the first game after the international break. The next game's at home to City. They'll be bouncing. Well, Anfield will be bouncing for that, and I'm sure they'll be sharp. So I'm not going to read into it too much. Deadlock at Goodison. Not really too much to talk about here, right? I think I liked Wissa's positioning. Everton were pretty flat, even with Brentford getting a man sent off. They just went to a compact, deep shape. And Bremer was very wide and didn't really have too much and didn't offer us too much. But like I said, against Leicester, that's the reason I bought him. There's just not much to speak about there. Whilst I really enjoyed the Liverpool game, not so much the Man United game, and I was expecting a lot more. One thing that really surprised me was how lethargic the press was in the first half, and the fact that it wasn't aggressive or it wasn't particularly high kind of just allowed Ipswich to have the ball. And I think if they're going to defend like that, they're going to just amount a lot of pressure against them, especially against the better sides. How they press going forward is a thing that means to be seen, but that's something to take into account. Secondly, it means that when they retrieve the ball on transition, they'll likely be a lot deeper, and then they'll have to rely on their transitional threat, long-distance transitional threat, to get some returns, which I don't think is great. Even though they're a side who have the profiles for it, something about it just doesn't seem to be clicking at the moment. They're probably not as ruthless as they once were. Another thing that I thought was pretty interesting, and I'm not sure if it suited it today, was having 2 out of the front 3 be runners in Rashford and Garnacho. I think in this type of system, especially when you have a pivot, which hasn't demonstrated the best on-the-ball quality, specifically Casemiro, and they just don't have the general level of physicality and covering space in abundance. I think having someone who prefers to receive ball to feet as opposed to running in behind is probably a bit more useful. I think you can combine better, especially because there's a lot of small distances between each player when you're functioning like that. I think that would have been helpful. I always thought this was a Mason Mount type of game. I was saying that to my dad. He's a United fan while we were watching the game, but he only got like 5 minutes. I wonder if it could become like a Bruno Mount and then channel runner up top type of thing, whilst the pivot is like this. But when Maino comes back into the side, if he's allowed to advance, specifically on that left side to support the run and act more as a creative and be a fairly high volume passer in and around like a bit more advanced areas, I think that could help. But there's a lot that remains to be seen, and we'll see what happens. Ipswich were very good today. They dominated that first half. I really, really like Hutchinson and Liam Delap. Liam Delap is a very, very strong footballer, really good athlete, good pace. And Hutchinson's ball carrying is I noticed this in the game against Liverpool, the first game of the season, and he just shows it again and again and again. He's so consistent. I almost expect him to drop a level when I watch him, because I'm like, oh, can he maintain this? And he has every game. So I'm really, really impressed. And I think that Ipswich will certainly cause problems to most defenses in the league. Leif Davis is really good down that flank as well. So yeah, keeping a clean sheet against them won't be too easy. And that's a sum up of the games this weekend so far. Transfer plans. As you can see, the slide hasn't changed in terms of my idea. It is still to roll in 13 and move Brian Mbeumo to Jared Bowen in 14. Attack that fixture swing. Get off a guy who's probably not playing in the positions that we would like. Take someone who's got brilliant fundamentals across the Christmas period, as does Mbeumo, but Bowen's got the better fixture run, and then look to bring Haaland in 18. However, whilst this still is the plan, I have had a couple of other thoughts. One is almost committing to no Haaland for pretty much the rest of the season and not getting him in 18 for that 5-week block. Because in 18, it's Everton at home, and Everton in form is not an easy game from an attacking standpoint. And he could give Haaland a tough game, especially if they sit really low and they're generally just quite sharp, okay? So that's one thing. And then it's only like a 4-game week span. So can I just not have him for that because everyone else is performing so well? Yeah, potentially. The other thing is, I don't think this trend of the forwards doing really well is going to decline. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, the quality of players is just a lot higher than it's ever been. I've spoken about this. The attacking quality in the league is really, really, really good. And the forwards, Nicholas Jackson, Matthias Cunha, Alexander Isak, João Pedro, Chris Wood, Ollie Watkins, Kai Havertz, Darwin Núñez, who from an FPL standpoint isn't great, but I'm talking about in terms of the quality of strikers and number 9s, Dominic Solanke. They're all very, very good footballers at very affordable price tags, given how the game has been structured this year. So do I really need him when the other guys can put up hauls? No. The other thing is, with a shift in the philosophy, we just see less clean sheets, seeing more goals, and it just provides better conditions. So maybe I just don't need him. Maybe no Haaland for the rest of the season actually becomes optimal. The flip is like, okay, what happens when he starts scoring? Well, if we don't need to captain him, there's no way I'm paying for him. And it's just in that 4-week block, would I captain him? But if other opportunities present themselves, then you know what? I don't need to. And I'll just captain Salah every week if he wants to keep scoring a ridiculous amount of points. So what does that mean? And this is what I started to think about yesterday. What if I just played, and I can with the depth, and roll in 13, make the move in 14, and then continuously have 2 frees? And what if I just continuously played hop on, hop off, find little matchups that I like, find little fixture swings, like 1-week fixture swings that I like, and just attack. I will give you an example. One fixture I was just thinking about yesterday is Spurs at home to Fulham. I would quite like Solanke for that if Anderson's injured. I think he could do quite well. Now, am I going to make the move? No, because I said I'm rolling in 13. But if I'm not to have Haaland in 18, and I don't need the 5 frees to restructure, then I could pretty much play super aggressively like that, knowing that I've got the depth in the squad, knowing that my exit routes into every other player but him are so easy, given I have 3 premiums, 2 expensive forwards, and a premium defender. So that is something I genuinely am considering. I'll let 13 unfold. I'll probably let 14 unfold, and then I'll see from there. It'll probably be in 15 that I decide to make my decision. But if I do go for that, 15, 16, 17, you'll see some very aggressive moves from me. And not only will it'll be from a playing standpoint, but from a content standpoint to try and identify these moves and exploit them. That will also be quite interesting. So it's some food for thought for you guys to consider, because I do think the basis is there, not just in terms of a gut feel, but certainly the logic that I've presented. That is all she wrote for today, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope you enjoyed. The team is in a healthy position, especially considering we just wildcarded. From a rank perspective, we've got a healthy base from which to explode off, and we will see what follows in the Christmas period, but I am certainly happy with the start. If you have not already subscribed, subscribe, especially if you're one of the people who enjoys regularly and has not clicked the button. I would genuinely be very, very, very appreciative. There is a game tomorrow, so enjoy that. It is Monday tomorrow, so enjoy that. And I shall see you on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on how the content pans out, for everything you need to know. Goodbye.